Thank you, Cindy. Hello, everyone. Everyone take a little stretch. 25 minutes of this panel, and then we'll go into a short break. So I'm really excited to be moderating and facilitating this panel. We're joined by Mayor Bill McKinney from the city of Zion, Illinois. He has been the mayor since 2019. The city of Zion is about 23,000 people. It is northwest of Chicago, about 47 miles on the shores of Lake Michigan. And their nuclear plant closed back in 1997. So we're going to hear his perspectives. And also Julie Sinton Pruniski from REACH. And Julie is the VP of Strategic Initiatives. REACH is the Regional Economic Action Coalition, uniting public, private, and civic leaders across the Central Coast of California. So Julie's REACH organization has been working with the impending closure of Diablo Canyon plant, which is in California. And that closing is pending in 2025. Closure is coming. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Mayor Billy McKinney, where just give us a brief history, if you would, of your community. I understand this is your hometown, and the plant closure, the waste, but when you stepped into your role as the mayor in 2019, where did you start, and how did you build your pathway to the success that you've seen so far?
Where do you start? That's a great question. When I came into this role as the mayor, our previous mayor, Art Hill, had already started the process of trying to get funds for being a nuclear storage facility from the federal government. And that was part of the Nuclear Waste Act of 1982. However, during the past administration, there wasn't anybody in the NCR, in that department in Washington, so it was very hard to reach people. So we started reaching out to our Congressman Brad Snyder in our area, and we started reaching out to other areas and being involved with forums around the country, nuclear decommissioning forums around the country, where people were having this issue in their communities. And when I took over, given that this process has already started, I was looking at what we could do in the meantime, because we lost thousands of jobs. We lost half of our tax base. We were receiving at one point $19 million from the nuclear plant and property tax. And that was cut down to about $1.5 million, which that 30% of our property tax rate increases. Businesses closed, people moved out of town, the housing market crashed. At that time, I was the Commissioner of Building, Property, and Zoning. And I start looking at our comprehensive plan, and I said, one of the ways that we have to get out of this mess while we're still trying to get funding from the Nuclear Waste Act from the federal government is to rebuild our housing stock. At that time, we had 60% of our housing stock was 60% was rental properties. A large group of landlords during the crash had come in and purchased properties that they weren't maintaining. So we implemented a rental inspection program to make sure properties were kept up to standards for health, life, and safety issues. And then we started reaching outside of our community to our state reps about ComEd Exelon, who own the facility, and start trying to get compensation from them. So fast forward to this past year, because of the efforts we made in reaching outside of our community with our state reps, we were able to get an energy bill passed through the Illinois Senate and House that will compensate us approximately $15 million a year to be a storage facility. And at that time, and I should back up a little bit, Exelon ComEd was looking to get a bailout from the state government, and some of our reps got together and said, if ComEd is going to get this big utility company is going to get a bailout, the city of Zion needs a bailout. That plant was shuttered 13 years prior to the time it was supposed to close. And so working with our reps through the state, they backed us, and we'll start receiving some of this money in 2023. Now, of course, when you're plant shutters and you lose the jobs, you lose those property taxes, the cost of your services for your cities and educating your kids, those prices, they're not reduced. And so we've been kind of hanging on by our fingernails for a lot of years, but we've just tried to find different creative ways around to get funding and improve our city financially with means in which we can control.
That's quite the endeavor in such a short time since becoming mayor. So you had talked, or we were talking about, and you said the rental housing inspection program, punching at other solutions, right?
Yes.
Which was such a great terminology. Or, tell me about your experience when the Washington Post interviewed you and said, how are you going to save Zion? What was your response?
Yeah. My response is that it was going to take the community, and it was going to be a group effort. And my history here in Zion, of course, I grew up here, played high school basketball, sports here, graduated, went to Northwestern, had a significant career at Northwestern. Then I ended up playing 7 years in the NBA, and then spent 33 years after playing in a front office management position. So I have a good history here with the people, have credibility here, but I also know in building a team and building a community that nothing gets fixed without the collaborative efforts of all the taxing bodies. And nothing gets fixed in a community or in our country unless we're all collaborating together to solve the issues. And part of that is people have to understand if there's an issue that impacts your community, then it's going to impact the community next to you. And in our community, being right on the shores of Lake Michigan, we provide drinking water to over 10 million people. Those nuclear spent fuel rods are less than 400 yards from Lake Michigan. And heaven forbid, should anything happen to the storage facility, where anything from the nuclear cask would get into the water, you can cancel Christmas. There's no drinking water in Wisconsin. We're right on the Wisconsin border, in Chicago, in Michigan, in Ohio. So when you start making people aware of these issues, and as I talked to local officials here, they said, well, we forgot all about that. Of course, you forget about it, but it's a regional issue, because not only do you have the loss of jobs, but sometimes with the loss of jobs, as we've seen during the pandemic, you also have an increase of crime. And those crimes don't just happen in your community, they happen in neighboring communities. So we've worked collectively to not only with our state reps, but the mayors around us to put measures in place that we're having the communication and collaboration that we can help minimize the problems that we each share.
And that's a great segue as far as working collectively, building a team. And so I'm going to jump over to Julie, who is going to talk more about how REACH has done just that as far as building a coalition of folks that are taking action collaboratively. Julie?
Yeah, thanks, Joelle, and thanks for having me here today. I work for REACH, the Regional Economic Development Organization that is serving San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara counties on the central coast of California. You can see our mission here, and we have a goal to create 15,000 good paying jobs by 2030. And one of the cornerstone priorities for us as an organization and as a community, and the reason I'm here today, is really to advance the conversation around the future of Diablo Canyon Power Plant, which, as Joelle mentioned, the first reactor is slated to go offline in 2024, the second one in 2025. So you can go to the next slide here. I just wanted to give some context for the site because I think it's a unique element of the Diablo Canyon site, and just give some context to the impact that the closure is going to have on our community. So San Luis Obispo County, where the site sits, is halfway between San Francisco and LA. It's the industrial site itself is about 585 acres. It's called Parcel P, and it's surrounded by 12,000 acres of undeveloped land that's prime for conservation. And the site sits right on the pristine California coastline, as you can see here. So Diablo Canyon's operated by Pacific Gas and Electric, PG&E. They're the largest private employer in San Luis Obispo County, and they have held that role for about 30 years. So in terms of what the closure means to our community, it's going to be the single largest economic impact in our county's history. There's going to be a loss of about 1,500 head of household jobs. Those are ones that are paying an average salary of around $150,000 and about 1,900 contractor jobs. So the closure is significant. It's also significant from the loss of the property tax revenues the mayor was talking about, $30 million annually, that's going to our local schools and governments. The next couple of slides I just put in here for context of just looking at the coastline here. So here's a view looking to the site from the ocean. And then the next slide here is just kind of a viewpoint of the plant itself. So the next slide, I just want to give an overview of the timeline of the process, starting with that announced closure, which came in 2016. That's when PG&E announced that that closure would begin in 2024. And then in 2018, there was a lot of work done by many stakeholders to secure mitigation legislation. SB 1090 was passed in the state legislature, and that secured about $85 million for the county and all of the Central Coast cities to really help invest in the future economic development opportunities for the community. And REACH, the organization that I work for, was actually founded in 2019 as a result of the announced closure. And we were brought on to really help the community determine how to chart our own economic future. I've heard a lot about this from other stakeholders today, but really recognizing that there was a need in our region to cover and to have an economic development organization to do the work around the economic diversification. So after multiple years of convening community stakeholders, the REACH was working on that, and obviously in the midst of the last 2 years that we all have been through. In early 2021, a memorandum of understanding, an MOU, was signed by 9 entities in the community. I'm going to go into it in just a little more detail in a second. And then in 2022, right at the end of 2021, REACH, with the assistance of R3 LLC, that is the management team of the Racer Trust, which is the largest remediation organization in the country. And then Jim Hamilton as well from the collaborative. We hosted a reuse workshop with a really large group of stakeholders. I'm going to go into that in more detail in just a second too. So this gives you just an overarching idea of the timeline that we've been on since the announced closure. And now I'm going to dig into a little bit more detail on those 2 last pieces you see there. So the MOU itself, created in early 2021, the stakeholders came together to really pursue a shared vision for the future of Parcel P, the industrial site, with a commitment to supporting the conservation of those surrounding lands that you've seen in the pictures that I've shown. So these stakeholders spanned a wide range from government at the congressional level, the state Senate and Assembly levels, as well as the county of San Luis Obispo, higher education with our local state university, Cal Poly, business represented by REACH, labor, and then also tribal and conservation organizations. So kind of 3 main goals were established in this MOU. 1, obviously to mitigate the loss of the high-paying jobs and the tax revenue, safety commissioning, utilizing local labor in that decommissioning process, and then pursuing future reuse opportunities. So the alignment among the group was around renewable energy, R&D, the blue economy, given where the site sits on the Pacific Ocean, aquaculture, and then protection of Chumash cultural resources as well. So we started bringing that MOU group together monthly. We discussed lightly some of the potential reuse opportunities. And at the advice of Jim, we brought on the R3 team to really help us dig into those reuse opportunities and help us map a path forward, I think, for reaching community consensus. Everyone comes to that table with different ideas of what those reuse opportunities are. So where we landed was we convened a reuse workshop. So this included not only our MOU stakeholders that I mentioned, but over 20 different groups came together. So it was local cities, conservation groups, advocacy groups, the fishing industry, and PG&E as well. And then the R3 team brought in a couple of subject matter experts to help advise the group as well. And at the end of that half-day session, the work groups came to similar conclusions around potential future reuses for the site. And what we call a bubble map was created, which you can see here on the next slide. So this was really the vision for what those reuse priorities for Parcel P could be. This is keeping it very general, high level. It shows just generally the areas for potential use. So things like higher ed, R&D, potentially some battery storage could be seen there. The site has a marina and a harbor itself, so really figuring out how to repurpose that. And then also bringing in some elements of cultural heritage education. So we are in the process right now of rolling this vision out to the broader community. And on this last slide, I'll just close with kind of some thoughts I think you've heard echoed from other groups today too. The first really big lesson for us is engage early and often. So we are 6 years from the announced closure right now, with only 2 more years to go before that first reactor goes offline, and we still feel pressed for time as a community. So in addition to the legislative funding that we were able to secure, we've begun the process of creating a SEDS for the full 2-county region. So while the plant sits in this San Luis Obispo County, many of the workers come and commute in from Santa Barbara County. So thanks to the EDA for that grant, because they recognize the significant impact that the closure is going to have. And then I think the second big lesson for us as a community is to chart your own path. So we aren't waiting and haven't been waiting until the closure happened to begin planning for the future reuse of the site. And we aren't looking for the utility to own that process. I think our community recognizes that we need to play a big role in owning that, because ultimately we know we are vulnerable to this closure and want to take action to diversify the economy. I will say, as you all know, it's not fast work, it's slow going. And so ultimately, I think we believe these efforts are going to be worth it in the time that we need for this transition. So I think with that, this last slide just has my contact information if anyone needs it, but I will turn it back to you, Joelle.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Julie. That was great. I'd like to talk about just what Julie had said about charting your own path. And Mayor, I'd like to go back to 2 of the things that you and I had discussed that goes hand in hand with charting your path. And that is, you did 2 very important things. You formed and if you would, could you talk about the Zion Leaders Group and also hiring a lobbyist and how that transformed a lot of things?
Yeah, Julie, what a great phrase. I love that. It just made my skin tingle with goosebumps when you said that, charting your own path. And, reflecting back, I don't think the leaders at that time thought about that, about the closure, because it was so far out. But as a group, as we understood this, what was happening in our city, we did form a group with all of our taxing bodies, which everyone has been impacted by those loss of jobs. Within the community, it's impacted everybody. So for so many years, the city has operated in silos. One taxing body is doing something else, and they're not communicating with the other taxing body. But every issue that you face within the city, every taxing body has to deal with it. And so for the past several years, we started talking collectively and then collaborating on our comprehensive plans, how they match up and what we can do to chart our future. That has been so crucial. We're starting to have community conversations where we're getting our citizens involved with giving us all input as to what things they see that we can do to help improve our community. Economic development. You talk about economic development. We have 90 acres on the lakefront, prime real estate that we can't develop until that land is either gifted back to us. And that's our most valuable asset. We live in a beautiful community, the lake a mile from us, and we don't have access to that. So we've been working with our legislators trying to get that land back so that we can utilize it at some point in the future. Planning in this regard, when I think about it, and when I came into this job as a commissioner, just listening to the documents that weren't maintained, the promise of what was helping this plant, helping our community, but dotting the T's and looking forward to a succession plan was not done. So that's fallen on us, and that the sins of our fathers. We take that on happily. It's been a great challenge, but when you're doing it collectively as a group, you can make great strides. It's like, forgive this analogy, it's probably a poor one given what happened at the academies. It's like slapping someone with an open hand. It hurts. But if you put them together as a community, and you have all those entities, Julie, that you're working with, that you've talked about, now you've got strength in numbers. And it's more impactful when people work together to resolve the issues within their communities.
I think that's what you were talking about, a contingency, right? As far
Yes.
as getting that contingency to actually get together, working with legislators. Can you just touch upon the lobbyist
Oh,
and how
God.
that changed things? Because
Yes.
that's the first time I've heard a community actually hire a lobbyist. So
Yes. My job as a mayor is part-time, but I work at it as a full-time position. And we never had a lobbyist to go down and work in our state capitol to help us build relationship with the legislators there, to let us know what funds are available. Grant funding is available for communities that are like ours, that are disinvested and economically challenged. And our lobbyists have opened so many doors for us, giving us an opportunity to gain grants and get money for infrastructure repairs, for safety initiatives. And because our community was so close-knit for so many years, I think they felt like they could solve all of their issues internally. And we know that, having been outside this community for so many years, that when you're trying to build something, you need to bring in outside people to be able to help you, because they have experiences, they have resources that your local residents just don't have access to. So that move has been, while when we first did it, some of the commissioners and some of the people said, why are you spending that money? But the money that we've got back in terms of fixing our alleys and our streets and our infrastructure has made more than it's paid for itself over and over.
great. Such an amazing story and insight to do that. Julie, can you talk a little bit about, as far as you have all these organizations, how do you get it down to the citizen level, like the residents and the people that are actually going to be using these end uses eventually? How do you get out into the community?
No, I think that's a good question. And that's kind of where we are right now, is we're looking, we've taken that bubble map. That's a great compilation of community stakeholders who really are really influential in the community. People trust them in the community. And so we're talking as an organization, as an MOU group, is how do we kind of roll that out to the broader public? And what are some of those mechanisms that we're going to be doing? So obviously, I think the map is really helpful from that standpoint, giving people the opportunity to visualize what could be there at that site. I do think there is a lot of talk of, yes, the plant is closing, but what does that really mean? And I think people understand the economic impact it's going to have, but then being able to really think about what it can bring and become to the community. It's been in the community for so long. I didn't mention in my earlier points, but offshore wind, we are one of the two wind energy areas off the coast of Morro Bay, which is very close to this site. So there's some, and I think that's why the site and the reuse opportunities are really focused on sort of the blue economy, R&D related to sort of clean tech and renewable energy. And that aligns really well in with the state and the federal goals those as well. So thinking about kind of positioning it in the community around that context, I think is really where we are right now.
Great. On that note, I see that we are exactly on time, and this has been such a great discussion. Thank you both for bringing your unique perspectives. We wish you all the best in your communities, and I'm going to turn it back over to Jerry.
Thanks very much, Joelle. And thank you to all of our panelists for sharing their experiences and for the great questions from the audience. We've been taking lots of notes, and any questions that we didn't have time to answer, we will follow up both on our blog and our newsletter. So we're going to head into a bit of a lunch break right now, but we'll be back in about 20 minutes. You'll see on your screen what's up next. After our lunch break is going to be a series of discussion rooms, and that's really going to give an opportunity to everyone in the audience to talk to one another and hear from a few more folks. Nothing will be recorded in those discussion rooms. So when the break is over, you'll head into the lobby and you'll be able to find a series of 4 different discussion rooms available in the list of sessions. We'll be in those for a bit. And then after the discussion rooms, you'll once again head to the lobby and join part 2, what comes next, to discuss, to hear about the UK's approach to these issues and to hear from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So we're going to leave a slide up that we're on break until about 1:30, and we'll see you back here then. Thanks very much.